Morning, everyone. Bonjour, welcome. First of all, I just want to say we should acknowledge the great work done by Joe Moses and bringing this program together, as well as the staff of the Thunder Bay Chamber of Commerce and the Anishinaabe Development Fund. A lot of work went into planning this day today, and I'm quite impressed at how it all came together. So if we can give those folks a hand, I'd appreciate it. So as Joe mentioned, my name is Jason Thompson, and I'm very proud to acknowledge that I'm a member of the Red Rock First Nation, as well as the Division Manager for Vector Construction. We are very excited to be a part of the APEX event and hope this is only the first of many. Vector Construction is a family-owned business. The local division here in Thunder Bay was established in 1986, and I'm very excited to say that we're celebrating 50 years in business in 2015. We have 18 offices throughout North America and 27 have sales offices in 27 different countries throughout the world, so with approximately 600 people. I'm very pleased to acknowledge that Vector Construction, throughout its 50 years we have been in business, has always understood that in order to have or to be successful, it's about respect. You have to respect the people who are part of your team. These include your staff, all your workforce, as well as your business partners, and to ensure that the project is completed successfully. And in saying that, that is why we are very pleased to be affiliated with this forum. The philosophy of partnership and sharing of information and ideas to support the success of business in Thunder Bay and the region is a benefit to everyone. Having First Nation communities and First Nation entrepreneurs engaged and participating in building a stronger economy in Northern Ontario is vital to ensuring success. And I'm pretty sure that's why we're all here today. We all understand that. It is my pleasure as a person who admires the accomplishments of our next presenter for the leadership skills he has demonstrated and his visionary focus, amongst many other great qualities. I am very pleased to welcome Chief Clarence Louis. Chief Clarence Louis is a Canadian First Nations leader and businessman. Chief Louis has been the chief of Osios, hope I'm presenting that all right, Indian band in British Columbia's Okanagan for 10 terms. The first beginning in 1985. Louis consulted with Federal Finance Minister Jim Flaherty in 2008 on matters of economic development. He is a two-term chair of the National Aboriginal Economic Development Board and was chosen by the U.S. Department of State as one of 6 First Nation leaders to review economic development in American Indian communities. In 2004, he received the Order of British Columbia. Chief Louis' constant message is socio-economic development is the foundation for First Nation self-reliance. Our communities need to become business-minded and begin to create their own jobs and revenue sources, not just administer underfunded government programs. Each of our First Nations must take back their inherent and rightful place in the economy of their territory. Native people must change their mindset from spending money to making money. As confirmation of the Osios Indian Band's commitment to business, the band owns and operates 9 businesses on the reserve, including vineyards, retail stores, a construction company, a ready-mix company, a championship golf course, ecotourism businesses, and activities in the forest division. In 2002, the band opened the first Aboriginal winery in North America. The winery is a joint venture with Vincor International. Although economic development is the means to achieving self-sufficiency, Chief and Council continues to emphasize the importance of maintaining the Okanagan language and culture in all aspects of the band's activities, including business. Once again, it is my pleasure to welcome Chief Clarence Louis.
In my language, that means it's a good day today, my relatives. It's good to be back on the traditional lands of the Fort Williams First Nation. Chief Peter, thank you for the introduction. And I know Nancy is going to do her job to keep me on track like most chiefs. Once I get talking, I get talking. I was in Treaty 3 yesterday in Kenora talking about the Sioux story and talking about economic development. And I open up my presentation by saying, First Nations are not stakeholders in their traditional lands. We are rights holders, is reminded by our past national chiefs. I know some business people don't like that, but that's okay. As First Nations people, we have had to struggle to regain our identity, to regain our rightful place in the economies of our traditional territories. The original treaty relationship, and I was in Treaty 3 yesterday. Today, I'm in a treaty area of the Robinson Superior Treaty. A lot of non-native people think those are old things that shouldn't be talked about. That's old times. To native people, the treaties are the foundation of the relationship of your ancestors and my ancestors. They're not something to be discarded. And so when our elders talk about our treaties, they're talking about the history, the real history of this land, not the colonization version. Canada does not start with the French and the English. We're in Ojibwe territory here, and in this territory, that's where the history starts. It's Ojibwe history in this region. And I'll be talking about, at lunchtime, the Osuyu story. But this morning, I'm going to do a broad overview of what I see has to happen in this country. The term that I'm in right now is chief. After I'm finished this term, I'll be 30 years as a chief of my community. I've been on over 100 Indian reserves in this country and on many, many Indian reservations in the States. I've had a chance to travel to Australia, New Zealand, and in a couple of weeks, I'm going to Germany and France to talk about Aboriginal tourism. The neat thing about the times we're in right now is that in the past decade, there's been more money and more jobs created on First Nations than in the previous 100 plus years. And in the next decade, there's going to be more money and more jobs created on First Nations than ever before. As I left Vancouver, a couple days ago, the Vancouver Sun front page is running a series about First Nation economic development in the province of BC. Last year, once again, at the highest court in this country, a First Nation proved on the basis of the law in this country that Aboriginal title and rights is not something that's old-fashioned. The Chilcotin decision showed industry that if you want to do natural resource development in the province of BC, the first ones you have to meet with are the First Nations. There was a mining company a few years ago that wanted to open up a gold and copper mine in my traditional territory. I had to read about it in the newspaper. I had to hear it on TV that this mining company was meeting with the regional district, was meeting with the province, was meeting with the mayors and councils in the South Okanagan. Then they decided to come and meet with the chief and council of the Sioux Indian Band. They wanted us to go to their high-rise office in Vancouver. Yeah, I went there. I brought an advisor with me. And I said, you can meet with these millionaires here. I'm only going to spend 1 minute with them because they insulted the Osuyus First Nation. So when I walked into their high-rise corporate office, I told them, I had to read about your development, and now you've decided to meet with us. Your project's not going to happen. You can meet with my advisor here. And I left. But a short story. We ended up signing an IBA with that mining company that turned out pretty good. Because after I scared them, I just scared them just a little bit. All of a sudden they had all their corporate guys and their lawyers and their whatever team. Kept on phoning. Kept on knocking on at our door. Chiefs in the room, we live in great times now. Because corporate Canada can't ignore us anymore. We have an impact on the economy of our regions like never before. I looked at the attendance list here. All the major banks have an Aboriginal engagement strategy, hire Aboriginal people. Now all the major corporations are doing likewise. So like it or not, corporate Canada, we're in your boardrooms like never before. And that's awesome. That's the way it should have been. The original treaty relationship was a business relationship. Yet the province and the country and the settlers turned it into a dependency relationship. The chiefs of this country do not want a dependency relationship any longer. We are not wards of the crown. We are not a burden on society. Yet, even in the Thunder Bay region, I heard a chief say to me a few years ago, my community has 90% unemployment. I cannot fathom that. When I was elected chief back in 1984, the first thing I focused on was economic development. And I continue to do that. The two things I love doing as a chief, the first thing I love doing is creating jobs. Because I firmly believe the best social program is a job. I firmly believe that wellness and healing starts with having a job. Most non-native people I see in the conferences, in the boardrooms that I go to, they have never been on welfare. They have never had to suffer the shame of standing in a welfare line to feed their family. I'm sure the same can be said in this room, that the vast majority of non-native people in this room have never had to stand in a welfare line to feed their kids. Yet, on most First Nations in this country, I'm not talking about mine, the vast majority of First Nations in this country have unemployment rates that non-native people would not accept in their communities. It's your job in this region. You should be ashamed if there's a First Nation in your region that has Great Depression unemployment rates. History shows that at the highest point during the Great Depression, unemployment was around 30%. So if that's true, then the simple math tells me there's First Nations in your territory that have been under a Great Depression far beyond the 1930s. And something needs to be done about that. In 2015, there should not be a First Nation in this country with Great Depression unemployment rates. That's somebody's fault. Whose fault is that? It's somebody's fault. So when I get asked to go across the country to share some stories and some experiences just like the two women did up here. Wow, Cindy and Alex, that was awesome. That was so awesome, limlim to my language, to see you have the courage to stand up here and share your story. I learned something from that because we have a conference coming up in a couple of weeks called Resland, where we're going to have 200 or 300 natives and non-native business people in the room. And what I saw here Cindy and Alex do, I'm going to do the same thing back home. So lim to my language for teaching me something here today. Because that's what we need, is stories like that to be told so that the non-native people know that what we're asking for is a fair chance and having the same economic opportunities that you have had in our traditional territories. We want the same standard of living that most non-native people have. That's all we're asking for. I believe it makes no sense to have a poor neighbor. It makes no sense. When we were poor back home, non-native people didn't pay attention to us. They didn't. Only they'd say, oh, those poor Indians. They should get a job. The federal government should do something about those poor Indians. But now that we're not poor anymore, this is what non-native people do to my community back home. This is what the Premier of BC does to the Sioux Indian Band back home. In the mayors and councils and regional district. In industry. That's the original treaty relationship. And that's what I want to see happen across this country, where industry and government and First Nations have that business relationship, where there are no Great Depression unemployment rates on any reserve. When I was in Kenora yesterday, I said, whatever the unemployment rate is on the closest city or town to a First Nation, that's what the unemployment rate should be on the reserves. That's equality. And as Joe spoke about, I think, you guys are doing something here, the Chamber of Commerce, and I get a chance to speak to Chambers of Commerce. I love hanging around business people. The second thing I love doing is making money. As First Nations people, we got to start talking about money. Money's not a bad word. The equation stamped in my mind is money equals opportunity. That's the equation stamped in my mind. I don't have a love of money. I have a love of opportunity for my people. I want my people to have opportunity. We just sent a group of kids to Scotland. Cost a lot of skalau. In my language, that's money. Because I want my native kids, when they're this high, to see things and see opportunity and to go places that I never had a chance. It's all going to cost money. But I just found out this morning, Thunder Bay Chamber of Commerce, you have an Indian as a chair, Joe Moses. That is awesome. I've never seen a Chamber of Commerce have a First Nation as their chair. That is progress. I'm going to show this short video, and Andre is going to be nice enough to play it. So we'll play the short video, and then I'll do my closing.
Wap Canoe. I'm Anishinaabe from the Ojibways of Enigamink First Nation in Ontario. Welcome to 8 Fire. The name of this series comes from an Aboriginal prophecy that says that now is the time for your people and my people to come together and build a new fire of peace and friendship. But let's face it, one of the biggest issues that stands between us is land. It used to be all ours, and now, not so much. But you know what? I'm not mad. In fact, in this episode, you're going to meet a whole lot of people who are thinking creatively and working hard to come up with solutions to the toughest problems that keep your people and my people from getting along.
This is my land. This is my homeland. It's Indigenous land.
The pride of having your own territory is huge.
Our culture is based on life on the land.
I see our territory as a place of survival of who we are, a place of survival of our culture and language.
Most of this desert back here is 1,000 acres. We could make millions off of it easily, but we're just going to leave it the way it is. We'll take a chunk of our land, do some good economic development, look after everything else, and leave the rest of the land the way it is.
This land is your land, this land is my land. Or as my people say, Kinawindoweki, 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 Kinawindoweki. This country is big, space enough for everyone. Why then is land at the heart of every battle between Aboriginals and non-Aboriginals? Just down the river from here, there's a swath of land that cuts through Ontario's heartland, full of cities, farm, and industry. But every kid on the Six Nations Reserve knows it as the Haldimand Proclamation. 950,000 acres given to their ancestors for helping the British win the war against the Americans. But as my mom told me, never mess with the Mohawk. They're still stubbornly fighting to get fair compensation for that deal. It's all part of an equation that's uncomfortable to calculate. Canada's land gains have been the losses of the First Peoples. But, hard as it seems, there are ways of working it out.
The best relationships between Native people and non-Native people are business relationships. That's the best. Because it's based on work, it's based on production, it's based on sharing. We have more abandoned businesses on a per capita basis than any First Nation in Canada or tribe in the US. And that's what I'm really proud of, is the fact that most of our people work for a living.
The Osoyoos call this valley home. It's the Okanagan in British Columbia, now a magnet for tourists, drawn by the scenery, the Gulf, and the grapes. On the 320 square kilometers that make up their reserve, the Osoyoos have reached out to those tourists. They've developed a vineyard, a golf course, and a 5-star hotel complex on their land. The result, a mini economic boom.
We've been able to create jobs, decent paying jobs, and we have to create more.
Commit Cellars is one of the band's biggest success stories. The vineyard is a partnership between the Osoyoos and Vincor Canada, the country's biggest wine producer. Several young people from the reserve work here.
Another year in that barrel will be awesome.
I needed a job in the winter time, and I went to our chief, spoke with him, and he said, give it a try. It's a good opportunity. And I came here, and I knew immediately that winemaking was for me. Good fruit characters, good integration.
Really multiple with regard to the tannin contribution. Really integrated aromatically.
Very, very good tannins. I agree. I would love to be the winemaker here, and Randy's been teaching me the skills, and looking forward to the future of having an Osage Indian Band member running the winery.
You know, the band is, they understand what it takes to survive in the 21st century from an economic standpoint, and they're very forward in their thinking. They understand where they have limitations, and that's one of the reasons why I think this winery has become is a joint venture.
So this is the reserve on the right-hand side. It cuts across the highway here.
Clarence Louis and his band are proud of what they've achieved, especially given where they started.
Even though we got what I would say a decent reserve, we still lost our best lands. We lost over 4,000 acres of our best land. Land claims is a big issue with every First Nation, and there's a lot of historical grievances that still have to be looked after. And if it wasn't for us losing our best land, we probably wouldn't have grown up in poverty.
So I'll be speaking again at noon and going deeper into the Su'uyu story. I'll close off now with a short story of what just happened in the province of BC with our First Nation a couple of weeks ago. For the first time ever in the province of BC, the BC government, we had a name-changing ceremony. We changed 3 names. One of a provincial park, one of a mountain, and another provincial park. And the minister told me this is the first time in the province ever that the BC government, from the premier, cabinet, has ever decided to take the pioneer names off of 3 of our cultural sites. And how it happened was just like Ippawash. I was in Ottawa last year, and then I was getting calls from the RCMP and my people. They dug up some human remains at a provincial park. And so I flew back home right away. And when I got there, I saw this big hole. The archaeologists were already there. And park staff were there, and government officials were there. Didn't take me long to get very, very angry. Because I knew what they wanted us to do. They wanted us to be good little Indians and to allow the dig to continue and to gather up the rest of the skeletal remains and then to bring them on the reserve and rebury them. That's what they wanted us to do. So they could continue on running that provincial park as they've run it for the past 50 or so, 100 years. And right away I thought, we ain't going to do that. We don't know why this person was buried here. We don't know who they are. But we do know those are Indian bones. And I told the park officials, get that backhoe out of here. We're going to remove these outhouses as well that are by these ancestral remains. That's why they were digging there. They were doing something with the septic field there. And I thought, we ain't moving these bones. We're not going to be good little Indians and move these ancestral remains back on the res so development can just carry on as usual. And then when I had my first meeting with the Premier's staff, I told them, I want you non-natives to answer me this. How many years have to go by before the graves of your people don't matter? I want to know. You government officials, tell me, how many years have to go by before the graves of your people no longer matter? None of them would answer that simple question. They just put their heads down. But I also told them I recognize that that's one of the most used provincial parks in your system. That many, many tourists have booked their sites there. And they've set aside their time in holidays to use that park. I understand that. So I'm going to compromise here. I'm not going to shut down, we're not going to shut down that whole park. Because families and people have already booked their sites there, they booked their holidays, business people have, families have. But of course, that grave area, we will close that down and go there with our elders and do song and ceremony there. Just that little inconvenience will happen for now. Go ahead, finish off the tourist season. Short story. So, the government, we did the name change and ceremony. Now, the names that stood for thousands of years before the pioneer names came to those 3 cultural sites that are important to our people. We're going to be in the BC legislature with our language speakers. It's going to be such an honorable day for us that for the first time ever, our names are going to be just important and recognized just important as the non-native names. That's a huge accomplishment for us. But that's the business relationship in a very difficult time, very difficult situation that can be worked out if engagement is done properly, if proper respect is given. And right now, we manage those 2 parks. That's part of the condition. We manage them. We'll keep them as a provincial park. But the management comes to the Sioux Indian Band. And our names, our native names, go on those parks. And that's something that happened just recently. And that's an example of the original treaty relationship that should have happened hundreds of years ago. So with that, I'll be back up here at noon. Nancy is an awesome conference organizer. She goes like this, and you listen. So Lim Lim, thank you.